I disagree. I love your Welcome back to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing the nature of the Islamic State. Okay, Ramsey, I'd like to go back to you in London. I think one of the reasons why it's so difficult to deal with a group like the Islamic State is because in the region there's so many different agendas, and then you throw in the powers from outside the region, including Russia, and this is one of the, you have these really odd alliances, very complex alliances, and sometimes very contradictory alliances, and this is one of the things that ISIS feeds off of, the contradictions of so many different foreign policies and agendas in the region and globally. Go ahead.
I can't agree more with that assertion, Peter. The fact is, this is, I think it's too late for the finger pointing. And this kind of zero-sum game where one party is entirely responsible and the other party is entirely innocent. I think after years of bloodletting in Syria and massacre after massacre, in which all hands and all fingers are bloodied with the blood of the innocents, I think we need to stop that nonsense, frankly, and talk very seriously about how do we end this crisis. If the parties that are involved in ending that crisis are all very much invested in maintaining that crisis, that becomes part of the crisis. You have the Middle East divided to two camps, whether you want to divide them based on Iran-led versus Saudi-led, with the Americans lending their support and their help and their strikes and military intervention on behalf of some parties against others. That conflict is not going to finish, and indeed ISIS is feeding on this drama. They are exploiting it, and they are becoming rather resilient. I can't, and even American generals are now saying, uprooting ISIS is not going to be a temporary mission. It is something that's going to take a long, long time. And that's even if the circumstances or the situation will actually allow for that process. We need to reverse what is happening right now. And what's happening right now is the Americans are playing a very, very dirty game at the expense of the Syrian people. That has to be confronted and has to be challenged.
Okay, Mohammed, you want to weigh in? Go ahead.
So, yes, I agree with you that actually the rise of ISIS is also a product of divisions over how to approach Syria. For example, the United States of America has refused to bomb ISIS in the suburbs of Aleppo because that would help the rebels. And actually, these are meetings that we did, and they told us that we could potentially help the rebels and anger Iran. And President Obama's top foreign policy priority right now is the nuclear talks with Iran. So he did not want that to interfere with the talks at all, and he refused to conduct strikes where strikes were needed. And they're only striking in Hasaka in northeastern Syria and in Kobani. So whereas United States regional allies believe that the removal of the Assad regime is the way to remove ISIS. That they believe that that's the thing that you should do in order to get rid of ISIS. Assad is not fighting ISIS. Assad is empowering ISIS through lucrative oil deals. Actually, the UK, where your guest is based, recently sanctioned a Syrian Christian that was working as a middleman between the Assad regime and ISIS, facilitating oil deals. So I agree with you. This is over, division. That the division over how to approach Syria is a major factor here.
Okay, Danny, maybe I think you could say very much the same thing, and it'd probably make a whole lot more sense if you fixed Iraq. Not Syria. Syria is not broken. It's not completely broken yet. I mean, if the U.S. and its regional allies wanted to make peace in Syria, they would have done it a long time ago. They don't want that. But Iraq is a very different story here, and this is where it all comes from. And now we're making the same mistakes all over again. But again, I asked at the beginning of this program, is this intentional chaos, or is this reckless policy, or both? Let's stay with Iraq. Let's move away from Syria just for a second. Go ahead, Danny.
I mean, this is more of a case of order through disorder, if you'd like. We have a geopolitical hall of mirrors, which you have different proxy wars and different theatres for conflict. Now, Iraq is the fundamental basis of ISIS before Syria was. ISIS went into Syria from Iraq. You cannot defeat ISIS in either country without having a backbone of Iraqi government forces or Kurdish groups fighting ISIS successfully in Iraq. Now, where the Americans have got it wrong in Iraq is the fact that they have worked to undermine the Iraqi government, which is fighting ISIS. Now, this in turn has boldened ISIS. It has strengthened their resolve, and it has ultimately contributed to a lackluster foreign policy by Barack Obama. Now, the issue in Syria, which is different, is that when ISIS were fighting Assad, or when ISIS were fighting the Iraqi government, as in President Maliki before, Prime Minister Maliki, they were aligned with Western foreign policy. Now this alignment has cessated. It's not there anymore. So there is a necessity to fight ISIS. But it's the way in which ISIS is fought which is very important. Now, the United States is not very keen on the different Iraqi militia groups who are fighting ISIS. And the coalition of states which Obama initially had to fight ISIS is made up of states with a very questionable history of helping jihadist groups within the region. Such states such as Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Gulf Arab states in particular do not have a vested interest in a stable Iraq. They want Iraq to be undermined so they can undermine Iran in tandem. And this comes down to the greatest problem within the Middle East, which is the division of different countries on sectarian fault lines.
Yes.
These different tectonic plates which happen in different countries. It's present in Yemen as well. Yemen is the greatest geopolitical example, whereas Iraq is the quintessential example of Arab division which allows these jihadist groups to come in. Libya as well. So what we have is areas where you have a political vacuum. ISIS arises in such a way as in a phenomenon in the region. So now we have extremism with radicalization and all in all instability within the Arab world. So this is the perfect situation where groups such as ISIS can arise, and the United States has an isolationist foreign policy, and this is Obama's cornerstone for the Middle East. I mean, this policy he's had since the inception of his time.
They do have an isolationist foreign policy, and that's why they're not doing anything about ISIS.
I don't think there's anything isolationist about American foreign policy in the Middle East. Ramsey, let me go to you.
In the sense that it's more with partners rather than direct intervention and direct boots on the ground.
Okay, let me go to Ramsey here. It was mentioned earlier, you mentioned it earlier the last time you spoke, is Iran. What is Iran's role in all of this? Because you say Iran and West, the people have really extreme views one way or another. I will posit that Iran is doing the West a favor. They're the ones that are doing a lot of the heavy lifting and will continue to do the heavy lifting against ISIS, though it won't get the credit it deserves in the West. Go ahead.
That's right. I do agree with that point. But it's also important, Peter, that we do not create this image of Iran of being the perpetual victim and the perpetual target of American foreign policy, and forget that Iran has done some serious damage in Iraq after the American invasion in Iraq, which empowered Shiite militias that have done a lot of killings and a lot of massacres in various parts of Iraq, targeting the Sunnis in particular. And I would say if it were not for that, if it were not for Ramadi and Fallujah and the horrible legacy created by Shia militias that were funded by Iran, I don't think that ISIS would have really been able to create that kind of, or Al-Qaeda in Iraq, then ISIS, be able to create the needed popular support and the needed recruit to go on their crusade or on their mission into Syria and elsewhere. That has to be noted. That said, Iran is indeed involved in a very fierce fight with ISIS in both Iraq and Syria, and credit to it for doing so. However, Iran is doing so also to advance its own military agenda, its own strategic and political agenda. If every party is going to support and fight against other parties for their own self-interest, the outcome is not going to be pretty, and ISIS will always find a way to exploit the differences.
Okay, Mohammed, let me go back to you in Washington.
Peter, I hope.
Go ahead.
Yes, Peter, I hope you are not being serious when you said that Iran is doing the West a favor by fighting ISIS in Syria, because actually Iran in Syria is only fighting the Syrian rebels that are fighting ISIS. So Iran actually is compromising and undermining the fight against ISIS in Syria by fighting the Syrian rebels. Iran is the main reason why we're in this huge mess, and they are a major contributor to the rise of ISIS, because in May of 2013, they allowed thousands of Hezbollah, sectarian Shia Hezbollah fighters to cross the border into Syria and fight on behalf of the Assad regime. They fanned extremism. They're aiding and abetting war crimes and crimes against humanity in Syria, and ISIS uses that as a recruitment tool. They're telling the Sunnis that we're here to defend you because the Shia are attacking you. So unless what Iran needs to do is to withdraw their militias from Syria and cooperate with a political solution.
Okay.
They are right now. They need to cooperate with a political solution because right now they're undermining the fight against ISIS. One final thing I'd like to say, Peter. I don't know if you're like any of your guests on the show today has been to Syria. I go to Syria. I'm not talking about this issue as an intellectual exercise. I have friends in Syria. This is about real people. It's not about some intellectual exercise. ISIS only fights the Assad regime every once in a while, once in a blue moon. They are not fighting the Assad regime. They are selling the Assad regime oil. This is a fact.
Go
if
ahead,
you want to
Danny.
deny facts,
Go ahead. We're rapidly running out of time. Go ahead, Danny. Jump in there.
Just quickly. I mean, I can name you Raqqa, Deir ez-Zor, Palmyra. These are all areas where ISIS has only been fighting the Syrian government. So for him to suggest that it's about Iran and we have to blame Iran and Iran's the big country which is doing everything wrong.
As you speak now, ISIS is fighting the rebels in Aleppo. Did you know that?
Don't interrupt, okay?
Saudi Arabia is equally as culpable as any other state. Saudi Arabia is the main state which has caused the proxy war within Syria. And to state that Iran is the sole cause of the problem is completely hypocritical when you have Turkey, which has opened its borders to the thousands of Western jihadists who have come in and came into Syria. These are not Syrian, they're not Iraqi, they're not Iranian. They come from Chechnya, they come from Britain, France, the US. Up to 2,000 British jihadists could be in Syria.
Okay,
thousands
Peter.
of French
All right,
and Germans.
Danny, I want to give Ramsey in London the last word. You have 20 seconds. You have 20 seconds, my friend. Go ahead.
In 2012, there was a document by the Defense Intelligence that predicted the rise of ISIS, and they in fact referred to it as the Islamic State in those documents. Go to the writing of Nafiz Ahmad, where he analyzes this document that was leaked recently. I think it's rather important that we pay attention to the fact that much of the creation of ISIS actually go back to the intelligence, to American intelligence and American calculation. And this is why I did argue and continue to argue that ISIS is essentially a Western phenomenon more than being a Middle Eastern phenomenon.
Okay, on that point there, we've run out of time, gentlemen. Fascinating discussion. Many thanks to my guests in London and in Washington. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time. And remember, crosstalk rules. I love you.